Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. You're watching Beyond World is One. I'm Jyotsna Kumar, and this is World DNA. Let's begin with the headlines. Russian drone attack hits Kiev early Saturday, wounding 7 people, 4 of whom are hospitalized. Explosions reported around midnight as air defenses respond and residents urged to stay in shelters. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky removes his powerful chief of staff and top negotiator Andrei Yermak after detectives raid his house as part of a sweeping corruption probe. U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services pauses all asylum decisions after Trump vows to permanently pause migration from all third world countries following shooting of 2 National Guard soldiers in Washington, D.C. Donald Trump says he is terminating all Biden-era executive orders and other documents that he claims were signed using an auto pen in a legally uncertain move as he steps up his criticism of his predecessor. New York Times reports Donald Trump spoke by phone last week with Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro, with the two discussing a possible meeting in the U.S. as Washington deploys major military assets to the Caribbean. Hezbollah leader Naim Qassem says the group has the right to respond to Israel's killing of its top military chief, Ali Tabatabai, in Beirut's southern suburbs, calling the strike a blatant aggression and a heinous crime. Airlines worldwide are canceling and delaying services after Airbus flagged a software fault affecting thousands of A320s. The alert follows a JetBlue control malfunction. Major carriers warn of significant disruptions as urgent fixes roll out. SpaceX's Transporter 15 rideshare mission lifts off from Vandenberg Space Force Base, carrying 140 small satellites into orbit. Delayed launch places satellites into orbit for imaging and environmental monitoring. And following a deadly shootout that saw the death of a U.S. National Guard member, a U.S. official has now confirmed that the Afghan national accused of shooting the 2 National Guard members will be charged with first-degree murder. The U.S. attorney for Washington, D.C. has identified the assailant as Ramanullah Lakhanwal. The attorney added that the 29-year-old Afghan national is set to face several charges. Media report described Lakhanwal as a member of the Zero Units, a CIA-backed counterterrorism group. As the Afghan national is set to face trial, a small memorial of flowers and American flags have been set up at the site where one of the U.S. National Guard members was shot and killed last weekend. Wednesday. In the wake of the recent shootout, the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services have halted all asylum decisions. In a post on social media platform X, the Immigration body said that all aliens must be vetted and screened to the maximum degree possible. And furthermore, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said that they are working to cut off federal benefits to illegal aliens and preserve them for U.S. citizens. The slew of decisions by the immigration authorities and the U.S. Treasury Department has left the Afghan nationals taking refuge in Pakistan in a dire strait. Now, many of the Afghan refugees waiting for their U.S. visas for years say that their last path to safety has been shut down.
There is, unfortunately, no future in Afghanistan. I am a journalist, and before the fall of the Republic to the Taliban, I was working as a reporter. If we are deported, first of all, there is no work there and the situation is extremely bad. And I personally have life security problems.
Immigration attorneys have lambasted the latest decision taken by the Trump administration, saying that the policies are really a form of collective punishment.
So the administration's measures to create these policies in response to one person's actions, it's really a form of collective punishment. That's how we see it. They are very clearly weaponizing this tragedy involving one person to build on their existing immigration agenda, which has already been restrictive, which has already led to a lot of indefinite pauses in processing.
The latest comes after U.S. President Donald Trump said he wants to permanently pause migration from poorer nations. Trump added that he is promising to seek to expel millions of immigrants from the United States by revoking their legal status. The U.S. president lambasted migrants for the rising crime incidents and housing shortages in America. He also called for a reverse migration. With the rising crackdown on immigration, Indian visa agencies have sharply criticized the Trump administration's policies. They say that Indians are an asset to the host economy, while adding that holding visa applications would be a shame.
Many Indians leave India, go to the US and contribute to its economy. Donald Trump should consider that some of India's brightest minds move there in search of better opportunities, security, and a certain level of satisfaction, and they contribute significantly to the country. So, when so many people place their trust in the US, taking such a decision would not be appropriate.
Now, WION's correspondent Susan Dani has sent us more details from New York. Listen to this.
The Trump administration is widening its crackdown on illegal immigration, moving from border into the financial system. The Treasury Department's financial watchdog, FinCEN, has issued a new alert warning money transfer companies to watch for suspicious transactions involving undocumented immigrants. Any cross-border transaction of $2,000 or more that appears tied to unlawful employment or illicit activity must now be flagged. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent also announced on Friday a parallel policy shift. He made the announcement on X, saying that the administration is working to restrict certain federal tax benefits from going to undocumented migrants, reserving them only for U.S. citizens. Taken together, these moves show the White House expanding immigration enforcement into tax policy and financial surveillance as well, with more regulations expected in the weeks ahead. Meanwhile, President Trump, in a separate development, said in a social media post that he is nullifying all executive orders signed by former President Joe Biden by the auto pen. Susan Tahrani reporting from New York for WION World is One.
Now, in Ukraine, a major shakeup at the very top of the government has triggered political shockwaves and raised fresh questions about Kiev's negotiating posture with the United States. Now, President Volodymyr Zelensky has announced the resignation of his chief of staff, Andriy Yermak, a figure long seen as the president's closest confidant and the country's lead negotiator in talks with Washington. The decision came just hours after anti-corruption investigators conducted search of Yermak's residence. In his nightly address, Zelensky said he was resetting the presidential office, stressing that Russia was waiting for Ukraine to falter during its delicate peace negotiations. Now, Yermak's name was absent from the new list of Ukrainian officials who will take part in the next round of talks with the U.S. Meanwhile, many Ukrainians have welcomed Yermak's departure, expressing relief after months of controversy around him. Now, amid this political turbulence, Kyiv once again came under fire. Early Saturday, loud explosions rocked the capital as Russia launched a fresh drone attack. According to the city's military administration, 7 people were wounded and a residential building, along with multiple cars, were damaged. Now, despite the escalating attacks, Zelensky says Ukraine is preparing for upcoming negotiations with the U.S. aimed at securing dignified peace with Russia. He emphasized that passing the 2026 national budget remains critical, ensuring Ukraine's defense capabilities and preserving financial stability.
Today I spoke with the President of Finland. Alex informed me about what Russia has said formally and informally, and about the conditions that Russia is putting forward. Now we are preparing for a meeting with the American side to discuss the steps that need to be taken to ensure that peace is truly achieved, and that it is a dignified peace. And when all attention is focused on diplomacy and defense in war, internal strength is needed. Internal strength is the foundation of our external unity and our relations with the world.
Зовнішньої єдності і наших відносин зі світом.
Sources say a Ukrainian delegation is set to travel to the U.S. this weekend. Talks may take place in Florida as Washington pushes forward with its own proposal for ending the war. In a related development, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is expected to skip next week's NATO Foreign Ministers meeting, which is a highly unusual absence, especially as allies are preparing to discuss intensive American diplomacy on Ukraine. While Rubio stays away from Brussels, President Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, is expected in Moscow for discussions linked to the diplomatic process. In Europe, meanwhile, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has criticized Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán for meeting Russia's President Vladimir Putin without a European mandate.
We have been aware of Viktor Orban's position for years. This is not his first trip to Moscow either. He already made a trip to Moscow in July last year, immediately after taking over the presidency of the European Council. That visit was not only unsuccessful. A few days after this visit, the Russian army launched some of its most violent attacks against civilian infrastructure and civilian targets in Ukraine. But he is acting without a European mandate, and he is doing so without consulting us.
Orbán's 14th visit to Moscow comes despite a series of EU sanctions on Russia and Europe's shift away from Russian energy. He has repeatedly questioned Western military aid for Kyiv, straining EU unity. And along a railway outside Warsaw, Polish security forces are stepping up vigilance and patrolling tracks as part of Operation Horizon, launched earlier this month to protect critical infrastructure. The move follows a string of suspicious incidents that Polish authorities say bear the hallmarks of Russian sabotage attempts. All right, to discuss more, we're now being joined by Peter Kuznick from Washington, D.C. He is a professor of history and director of the Nuclear Studies Institute at American University and a defense expert. Thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast. Always a pleasure having you. Now, Yermak was the top negotiator in the peace deal. The question is, what impact can it have on the deal with the top negotiator gone?
You have to realize that Zelensky was already in a very weak position. The Russians had seized Pokrovsk. Russians were making advances on the battlefield. Ukrainian troops were deserting at record numbers. Morale was low. And then on top of that, they're hit by this corruption scandal, which the Ukrainian people see that Zelensky's closest allies have skimmed off $100 million in corrupt expropriation schemes. So Zelensky's popularity has been very much weakened. And then you've got people fleeing and getting fired. Zelensky's business partner fled to Israel ahead of getting arrested. And so with all of this going on, especially in the energy sector, at a time when much of Ukraine only has energy, electricity for a few hours a day, people are just getting fed up. And the question then, we've got this peace proposal, and now Yermak, who is not only chief of staff and top negotiator, but the second most powerful man in Ukraine, is forced to resign after the anti-corruption units investigate his apartment. You know, this is just too much. And so while countries are hesitant to keep giving military aid, because the narrative is that Ukraine is losing on the battlefield, and they're hesitant to keep giving financial aid when you see this massive corruption, Ukraine is in a very, very weak position now in these negotiations. It's sad to watch, but if it brings an end to the fighting, maybe it's worth it.
Right, and then when it comes to political influence, of course, Zelensky is. What kind of effect does it have on Zelensky politically? And now that is he at a weaker position when it comes to the deal?
Yeah, he's at a much weakened position. The opposition has rallied in Ukraine around Poroshenko and other opposition parties. They're going to call for a no confidence vote, very likely, which would mean that the entire cabinet will have to resign, and Zelensky will have to try to put together another cabinet. It's possible that the entire government collapses at this point. So in these negotiations that are taking place, Zelensky, as Trump said back in February to Zelensky, you have very few cards to play. He's got fewer cards to play now than he certainly did then. And it looks like the peace plan, the 28-point peace plan, which was reduced to 19 and now it's 22, certainly favors the Russian positions on a lot of things. So I don't think Zelensky is in a position to bargain very effectively at this point.
Right. Of course, in a related news, I also want your opinion on Marco Rubio. He's the U.S. Secretary of State. He's not going to this NATO meeting that's going to happen. Is there some kind of underlying message that is being drawn here?
Very likely they're sending a signal. Part of the message that we've gotten repeatedly is that Europe is not a major player anymore. Europe was cut out of these negotiations, as was Zelensky in the early rounds. And you look at the position of Merz, Starmer, Macron, Rutte, von der Leyen, Kallas. The European leaders are being portrayed now increasingly as warmongers. Their goal is to keep Ukraine in the fighting. They seem willing to let Ukraine fight to the last Ukrainian. And Ukraine does not have any hope of taking back the land that Russia has claimed and gotten. And so the Europeans are egging the Ukrainians on, even though it's this position Ukraine is in today is stronger than it's going to be in a month from now, or 6 months, or a year. They're just going to lose more territory, more of the economy, more of the infrastructure, more human beings, and it's going to be more of a disaster. But so I don't understand what the Europeans think they're doing in trying to encourage Zelensky and the Ukrainians to keep on fighting on some pipe dream, some myth, some fantasy that they're going to somehow turn this around. They don't have the manpower, they don't have the armaments, and they no longer have the morale to do so. So it's in the best Ukrainian interest to get a deal, even if it's not a good deal. You know, as the Japanese sometimes say in some of my favorite Hiroshima-related movies, an unjust peace is better than a just war. And that's the way I feel about Ukraine now. They're only going to be losing more and more. And I think Donald Trump, in his very limited brain, seems to understand that. What Rubio has been one of the people who's been a real war hawk, anti-Russia, anti-China, and the fact that he's being now sidelined is probably a good thing. We want to sideline Hegseth also, who Hegseth had said, we want to get the Ukraine war over with so we can go after the real enemy, China. You know,
Right.
but this is
Right.
not the war. This is, as Modi said, this is not a time of war. We
Right.
need to be finding
Right.
peaceful
Absolutely.
solutions.
Well, of course,
need diplomacy.
I hear you, and especially at this point where we see this corruption scandal coming, it almost seems like Ukraine will have to go and get this peace done, because it's not just the war, but it's internal war that is facing right now. Thank you so much, Mr. Kusnik, for joining us on the broadcast and giving your insights.
Thank you for having me.
A global air travel disruption on Saturday after Airbus issued an alert affecting thousands of its A320 aircraft. Airlines around the world are canceling flights as urgent software upgrades are carried out. The airlines announced delays and cancellations on Friday after Airbus warned that up to 6,000 A320 planes in operation may require urgent software updates. Air France canceled 35 flights, while Colombian airline Aviation reported 70% of its fleet impacted. American Airlines say it is updating software on roughly 340 planes, expecting most to be ready by Saturday, though some aircraft may take weeks to service. The alert comes after a JetBlue A320 experienced a control issue on October 30th while flying from Cancun to Newark, forcing an emergency landing in Tampa in Florida. While some passengers were reported injured, Airbus explained that intense solar radiation could corrupt critical flight control data, affecting a significant number of A320 family aircraft. Now, replacing this software usually takes a few hours, but for around 1,000 aircraft, the process could take weeks. Airlines are notifying passengers individually via SMS and email about cancellations. The European Union Aviation Safety Agency, or EASA, confirmed Airbus informed regulators and emphasized safety as a top priority. The aerospace firm Thales, which makes the flight control computers, said the issue is with software not under its control. The Airbus A320, first produced in 1988, is the world's best-selling aircraft with over 12,257 sold. For comparison, Boeing's 737 has 12,254 units sold. Now, disruptions are expected to continue over the next 10 days as airlines work to update software. And Arsenal's title hopes are getting a big vote of confidence from one of their former midfielders. Alex Song says this could be the Gunners' year, with Arsenal currently sitting on top of the Premier League and leading the Champions League group. Arsenal are enjoying one of their best starts in decades. They have a 5-point lead over Chelsea in the APL and have lost just once this season. The Gunners have 100% record in the Champions League. Their recent 3-1 win over Bayern Munich underlines just how strong their challenge is this season, both domestically and in Europe. With consistency in defense and creativity going forward, many now see Arsenal as serious contenders for major trophies. They have never won the Champions League and last won the EPL in 2003-2004 season.
A show of strength for Arsenal. The way I'm seeing them play the beginning of the season, you know, the way how they play in the back, they play in the front, they're doing very well. The balance is perfect. Arteta doing a very good job, and the players, they are there, they are listening what he's saying. I'm thinking, for me, Arsenal is the year for Arsenal. Yeah, you know, Arteta is a good manager, and both teams, they are doing well, but you know, it's too early. It's too early, and especially in Premier League, you know, you've got at some point, teams deep, so it's difficult to tell now.
All right, with that, we call a wrap to this bulletin. But don't go anywhere. News and updates will follow on the other side. You're watching WION The World. Stay tuned.
Where darkness hides behind every corner. Where the truth is stranger than fiction. A a show that dives deep into the stories which shock and mystify. Unsolved murders. Psychopaths who defy explanation. International war crimes. And millions swindled in financial fraud. The victims, the accused, and the sinister plot. Crime is your front row seat to darkness.
Our ambition is to convert India's logistics to green mobility and support nation's path to net zero emissions by 2070. I am really looking forward to the event and the important conversation ahead. Sustainability is a topic that's very close to my heart. Join me on Mission Sustainability on December 2nd, only on WION World is One. Remember, no action is not an option.
Get ready for the biggest sustainability stage. A 5-hour on-ground event bringing together leaders, innovators, and visionaries to reshape the path ahead. Mission Sustainability 2025. Discuss and deliberate on the issues that matter. 5 power-packed sessions and a special address by Union Minister of Road Transport and Highways of India, Nitin Gadkari. Each conversation, each idea, each commitment brings us closer to make sustainability a way of life. Be a part of the change. Mission Sustainability 2025, Season 3. No action, not an option.
Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. To some, it's an extreme ideology. To others, it's the very soul of India. To some, it's rebellion. To others, it's a principle of nation building. Coming soon to challenge perceptions in RSS Centenary Year, Kesariya at 100.
Dharmendra, the he-man of Indian cinema, died at 89. This week, we look at the legacy he leaves behind. No rare facts about the legendary actor.
ये वीरू है.
And pay a tribute to all the Sholay stars who are no longer with us. All this and much more with me, Diksha Bisla, on WION at these times.
One planet, one mission, one platform. One step towards sustainability, one destination. Join us on Mission Sustainability 2025, Season 3. No action, not an option. December 2nd, 2025, New Delhi. Where darkness hides behind every corner. Where the truth is stranger than fiction. A show that dives deep into the stories which shock and mystify. Unsolved murders. Psychopaths who defy explanation. International war crimes.